The Brianna Maitland case really deserves its own series, but for now, we're replacing it as part of the Maura series. It took place in Vermont, about 90 minutes away from where Maura disappeared. And it happened only 6 weeks after Maura went missing. It, too, remains unsolved. Is there a connection? Let's get into it. Brianna Maitland was 17 years old when she went missing on March 19th, 2004. She was on her way home from her job at the Black Lantern. The Black Lantern opened in 1803. I'm recording this episode at the height of autumn foliage in New England. If only I could spend a night or two at this place. It's an inn with a bar and a restaurant. The quaint little town of Montgomery, Vermont is almost all the way to the border with Canada. Population 1,100. If you like covered bridges, there are 7 in Montgomery. Brianna and her brother actually grew up in the next town up, East Franklin, on their parents' farm. From an early age, Brianna trained extensively in jiu-jitsu. She started out attending the regional high school of Missisquoi, not sure if I said that right, with about 100 students per class. Sophomore year, she transferred to Enosburg Falls High School. This is where it gets tricky. Her high school experience is different from what I would consider normal, but maybe things are also different in agricultural towns. In October 2003, she turned 17. Still in high school, she decided she didn't want to live on the farm anymore, so she moved out of her parents' home. Her mother said there were no particular problems at home. She just wanted more independence and also to be near a group of friends that went to a different high school. That school was 15 miles away. Briefly, she enrolled in that same school that her friends went, but her living arrangements were up in the air. She moved in and out of several friends' homes. By February, she'd quit school and moved in with her childhood friend, Jillian Stout. Jillian Stout lived in Sheldon, Vermont, which is 20 miles west of Montgomery, where she worked and went missing. Brianna had enrolled in a GED program to finish her degree. 3 weeks before she went missing, she was attacked at a party by an old friend, Keely Lacrosse. At first, I figured that was a misspelling of Kelly, but I found that Keely Lacrosse was arrested in Montgomery 7 years after all this. Seems like a real piece of work, this girl. She was that time a part of a group of people that conducted a kind of home invasion. During a struggle with the home's owner, Keely bit the woman on the leg. She was charged with burglary and simple assault. These rural areas seem to be producing some very troubled kids in today's world. Keely, a couple of years older than Brianna, had been very close friends with her. But then Brianna started sleeping with Keely's boyfriend. Keely confronted Brianna in the parking lot of a nightclub, punching her twice in the face. You can see the results here. As I said, Brianna's life was far from the model life of a 17-year-old. She moved out of her parents and switched schools, but didn't actually have a place to move into. She stayed at various friends' houses, and when she started seeing Keely's boyfriend, she began crashing at his place sometimes. Brianna is described as a very outgoing and friendly girl who made friends very easily. Yet we see all these signs of instability too. Why didn't she just go back home? Her parents have made themselves frequently available to the media over the years. They sound like they love Brianna and miss her very much. We're also told by police that Brianna was experimenting with various types of drugs. So Brianna took a job at the Black Lantern as a dishwasher. The inn is described as an upscale bed and breakfast with a small restaurant and bar. It wasn't the kind of place that drew a bar crowd, and Brianna worked in back anyways in the kitchen. She left work the night she disappeared at 11:20, which was normal. Driving her 1985 Oldsmobile, she traveled Route 118, seemingly in the direction of the town where she was staying. On that night, she was shacking up with Jillian Stout. She left a note for Jillian earlier saying she'd be back that night after work. Jillian saw the note that evening, but then went to stay with her sister for a few days. Had Jillian planned to stay there? I have to assume police investigated that thoroughly. The day Brianna disappeared, she had actually taken her GED test that morning. She then had lunch with her mother to celebrate. Her dad was working in New York. Brianna was discussing college. After lunch, they went shopping. While in the checkout line, something outside caught Brianna's attention. Brianna went outside to check it out. When her mother came out a few minutes later after completing the purchases, she found Brianna shaken. But her mother, not wanting to pry, didn't push to find out what had happened. So we don't know. Her mother dropped her off at Jillian Stout's place. It was the last time she'd ever see her daughter. Brianna went to work, clocking out, as we said, at 11:20. Witnesses saw her leave alone. The next afternoon, her car was found at the old Dutchburn farmhouse, an abandoned place. The car had crashed into it backwards. A piece of plywood from a window fell onto the trunk, and part of the house's exterior wall was destroyed. The lights on the Oldsmobile had been left on. The driver's and passenger's side door were both left open. 2 of Brianna's paychecks were found inside the car. Outside the car was found loose change, a water bottle, and an unsmoked cigarette. The trooper, assuming the car had been abandoned by a drunk driver, had it towed. Because of her vagabond ways, Brianna was not reported missing for several days. Jillian Stout spent the weekend at her sister's. When she returned and Brianna wasn't around, she assumed she was just staying with someone else. But on Tuesday, Jillian, finally suspecting something might be wrong, called Brianna's mom, who started calling various people around town to see where she might be staying. Unaware that Brianna's car had been towed from the farmhouse, she filed a missing persons report. When state police troopers visited her to get more information, they showed her a photo of Brianna's crashed car. The mother looked at this in horror. She immediately sensed Brianna was a victim of more than an accident. A witness driving by the scene at the farmhouse that night between 11:30 and midnight remembers seeing the car with headlights on, but no one around it. Another witness going by at 12:20 remembered seeing a turn signal on. A former boyfriend drove by at 4 a.m. after a night of partying in Canada. He saw the vehicle with no one around it. The next morning, a passing motorist was struck by the oddness of the crashed car into the farmhouse, so he stopped and took photos. He testified to seeing a bracelet or necklace on the ground. The Vermont State Police did not then believe foul play was involved. They concluded she was a runaway. I'm not sure why. What runaway crashes her car then leaves behind in the car her paychecks, her ATM card, and her contact lenses? Since Brianna got out of work at 11:20, unless she was drinking hard at work, it seems unlikely she was intoxicated when she crashed the car before the first witness drove by, which had to have been just minutes later. The FBI, 3 years later, put out a flyer which suggested the accident might have been staged. Not sure why they concluded that. Maybe because it's hard to picture why she crashed in reverse into the house. Looking at the photo, it's hard to imagine how someone could spin out and end up hitting the house straight on like that. According to Wikipedia, law enforcement later concluded that foul play was likely involved. You think? That car had to hit the house with enough speed to do substantial damage. Maybe Brianna met someone there. They chose the location because the home was abandoned. At some point, things went bad. Brianna hurried back into the car. One of her attackers followed and scrambled in the passenger door. And as Brianna tried to pull away, the attacker struggled to stop her. The car ended up in reverse as she hit the gas. For example, maybe Brianna owed a drug dealer money. That could have been who she saw in downtown earlier that day. Of course, if she was in debt, why were 2 paychecks uncashed? What do you guys think? So Brianna went missing 6 weeks after Maura Murray did. The areas they went missing in were about 90 miles apart. Both of these situations involved accidents and abandoned cars. Could there be a connection? There's more. In the week following her disappearance, the Vermont State Police received a terrifying anonymous tip. It said Brianna was being held against her will in a house about 10 miles from the accident scene. The house was rented by 2 known drug dealers, Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Charles Jackson. Police raided the place on April 15th, almost a month after Brianna went missing. They found substantial amounts of cocaine and marijuana, but no sign of Brianna. Later in the year, police received a statement from a woman saying that these 2 men were involved in killing Brianna. They were said to have killed her a week after she went missing. This woman actually signed an affidavit, so I don't think this was an anonymous tipper. She said Brianna had lent money to Ryans to buy crack. They got into an argument and he killed her. They stored her body temporarily in the basement of another woman's home, a woman that was in jail at the time, and eventually they dismembered her with a table saw and disposed the pieces at a pig farm. Well, it seems to me police could have tracked down this incarcerated woman's home and checked it out. The population in these towns tends to be 1,000 or 2,000 at most. How many of those are residents where there's an incarcerated woman? I wouldn't think many. Wikipedia only says that law enforcement was unable to corroborate the claims in the letter. Does that mean they were able to contact the woman who signed the letter? Don't know. Other anonymous tips came straight to Brianna's family. It gives a sense of how many wild claims come in when there's high-profile cases. One claim said Brianna had been tied to a tree in the woods. Another said she was disposed at the bottom of a lake. You can see how the suffering for the victim's family never ends. In 2012, 8 years later, the FBI investigated a possible connection to serial killer Israeli Keys, who had ranged from Alaska, Oregon, and Washington on the West Coast to Vermont and New York on the East Coast. But police were able to rule him out, however. In 2016, investigators recovered DNA from Brianna's car. The results were not made public at the time, but in March of this past year, 2022, Vermont State Police revealed they had found a match. They said it belonged to one of 11 people they had tested previously in connection to the case. Now, just because someone was in Brianna's car at some point doesn't make them a suspect, but it's reported the DNA was found on the ground near her car. I presume this means it was found on one of the objects left there, perhaps the water bottle. But again, that doesn't necessarily make the person a suspect. The bottle or whatever object might have been kicked out of the car by Brianna or someone else during a struggle. And since there's no body, police can't even say Brianna is dead. So you can see the challenge in making an arrest or getting search warrants. Police have said there's no connection between this and the Maura Murray case. But I suppose, frankly, that's meaningless. They've said variously that Maura committed suicide and was likely a victim of foul play. They've said Brianna was a runaway who staged an accident. And then they've said she's likely a victim of crime. So bottom line is they really just don't know. But to be honest, it is kind of hard to imagine a connection between the two cases. If Maura was the victim of foul play, this would almost certainly involve someone living in that area of Woodsville, New Hampshire, because there was no way anyone could anticipate Maura's accident. So it would be an opportunistic predator, which sadly is more plausible than most of us realize. Because the number of people out there who fantasize about violence and killing seems surprisingly high. Many don't ever act on the fantasy, but if they're presented with an opportunity, they might not be able to stop themselves. It's possible that in Brianna's case, something similar happened. Someone took advantage of it, but that also would probably be someone local, not someone from the Haverhill, New Hampshire area. Brianna's situation seems likely more complicated, involving someone she knows. Montgomery has 7 covered bridges. It's a place where people travel to ski and check out the fall foliage. But in today's world, you never know what else is going on in these rural areas. Most homes are no doubt filled with neighborly and kind people, but there's no shortage of violence and dysfunction lurking in the shadows where parents aren't able to see what their kids are doing. Please stay with us for the next video where we discuss the contractor who reported 3 months after she disappeared seeing Maura on the road 4 or 5 miles from the accident scene. This guy lived less than a mile from where she hit the tree. Did he really see her on the road? Or did the investigation just start to get a little too close to his home? Also, we want to invite you to check out our new series on this channel, Creepy Friday. Every Friday, we'll post something that's a little more fictional, sometimes a lot more fictional. Tune in right as you're going to bed, and we'll see if we can fill your dreams with nightmares. And do us a kindness, if you could, and please hit the subscribe button like a truck driver with no brakes hammering the horn before an intersection. So we can crash the algorithm, please click like and make a comment. We'll send a team out to clean your windshield if you click the bell next to subscribe and select notify. See ya.